In the silent city of the dead where white stones stand in perfect formation, Sergeant Ryan Miller marched his life in 21-second intervals. Each step was a penance, each perfectly creased uniform a layer of armor. As a sentinel at the tomb of the unknown soldier, his job was to be a monument of flesh and bone, unwavering, unfeeling, a symbol of perfect discipline in a chaotic world. And for 2 years he had been perfect. His focus was absolute. Nothing ever broke the sanctity of his patrol. Nothing pierced the granite wall he'd built around his heart. Until she came. For 112 days he watched her. A small girl no older than 7 with corn silk hair and eyes as solemn as the marble tomb she faced. Every morning just after the 9 o'clock guard change, she and her mother would walk to the same wooden bench overlooking the plaza. There she would perform a silent ritual. She'd carefully place a faded one-eyed doll on the bench, propping it up so it could watch the sentinels march. Every evening long after they were gone, cemetery staff would politely retrieve the toy. But the next day, she and the doll would be right back. To Ryan, this small act of disorder was a grain of sand in the perfect machinery of his world, a smudge on a polished lens. He didn't know why it bothered him so much, but the sight of that tattered doll sitting in judgment over a place of ultimate sacrifice began to feel like a personal insult. It was a ghost of a life that didn't belong, a reminder of an innocence this hallowed ground had paid for in blood. Today was the 113th day, and today something inside him, a wire stretched taut for years, finally snapped. He finished his watch as the setting sun cast long shadows across the graves. He saw the girl and her mother getting up to leave the doll left behind on its lonely vigil. For the first time, he decided to intervene. He walked toward the bench, his off-duty uniform still radiating authority, ready to deliver a simple, necessary correction. He was going to end this ritual. He had no idea it was about to end him. This is a story of honor, sacrifice, and the profound humanity that lies behind the uniform. If you believe those stories deserve to be told, make sure you subscribe to our channel. We bring you powerful stories like this every single week, and you won't want to miss what's next. To understand Sergeant Ryan Miller, you have to understand the 21 steps. That's the length of the black mat laid before the tomb. 21 steps south. He turns faces east for 21 seconds. He turns again facing north for another 21 seconds. Then 21 steps back. The number 21 represents the highest military honor, the 21-gun salute. For Ryan, these numbers weren't just symbolic. They were his salvation. They were the bars of a cell he had willingly built for himself. His life before the Army was chaos defined not by a foreign war, but by a quiet one inside him. It all began on a sunny Tuesday afternoon when he was 16. He was supposed to be watching his 8-year-old brother, Tommy. But there was a girl, a phone call, a moment of teenage distraction. When Ryan turned back, Tommy was gone. They found him by the creek at the edge of their property. He'd slipped on the mossy rocks trying to grab a plastic spaceman, a cheap toy that had fallen into the rushing water. The toy was found downstream unbroken. Tommy was not. From that day on, guilt was Ryan's shadow. It was a cold presence at the dinner table, a weight on his chest at night. So he joined the Army to outrun it, hoping to find redemption in combat. He served 2 tours and earned medals for his bravery, but no commendation could silence the whisper in his soul. You failed in your duty, you let him down. The tomb guard was his last resort. Here in this place of perfect silent order, he could offer his life as a constant living apology. His duty was to protect the unknowns, to be a sentinel for those who made the ultimate sacrifice. But secretly, he was guarding the memory of one known boy. Each perfect step, each flawless rifle inspection, was his attempt to atone for one moment of imperfection. His stoicism wasn't just discipline. It was a fortress built to keep the ghost of his brother locked away. And then came the girl with the doll. At first it was a minor annoyance, but as the days turned into months, the doll became a symbol. It was a child's toy just like Tommy's spaceman. It was a thing of innocence left in a world of solemn sacrifice. To Ryan, it felt like a violation. It was a reminder of the life he'd failed to protect. He didn't see it as a tribute, but as litter on sacred ground, a carefree whisper in a place that demanded reverent silence. He began to resent the girl's persistence and her mother for allowing it. The doll was a crack in his fortress, and he watched with growing agitation as that crack spiderwebbed across his soul. He had to make it stop. The order had to be restored. From his post, Ryan became an unwitting student of the girl and her mother. He never heard them speak. Their language was one of gentle touches and shared glances. The mother always had a tired look in her eyes, a sadness that clung to her like a fine mist. But when she looked at her daughter Lily, a quiet strength would shine through. Lily herself was a study in contrast. She looked small and fragile, but her daily pilgrimage to the bench was made with the determination of a soldier on a mission. Ryan would watch as she'd carefully wipe the bench with a handkerchief before placing the doll down. She would adjust its faded calico dress, smooth its matted yarn hair, and whisper something to it, her breath fogging in the cold morning air. Then she'd sit beside it, small hands folded in her lap, and just watch the guards. She never fidgeted. She never got bored. She just sat a silent observer, as if drawing strength from the unwavering rhythm of the patrol. He noticed the doll's condition getting worse over time. Its one remaining button eye seemed to stare back at him with a hollow accusation. A seam on its leg was starting to tear. Ryan found himself focusing on these little imperfections with an irrational intensity. He'd see the cemetery staff approach the bench at the end of the day. Always gentle, always respectful. They'd pick up the doll as if it were a lost child and take it to the lost and found. But Ryan knew it would be back the next day. The girl's persistence was a quiet, relentless force. His fellow guards noticed his preoccupation. "Forget the doll," Miller Sergeant Peters told him one afternoon. "It's not our department. Let the grounds crew handle it." Ryan just nodded his jaw tight, but he couldn't forget it. Because every time he saw that doll, he didn't see a toy. He saw Tommy Spaceman. He saw a broken promise. He started telling himself a story that this little girl wasn't loving, she was just careless. That eventually she'd forget the doll, and it would be lost forever, just like his brother. This story, born from his own grief, was the only thing that made sense, and it fueled a growing, righteous anger. The girl needed to be taught a lesson about respect, and he decided he was the man to teach her. The day it happened, the air was heavy, promising a storm. Dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, mirroring the tempest in Ryan's mind. He'd just been relieved from his watch, the weight of the M14 rifle leaving a familiar ache in his shoulder. As he walked toward the barracks, he saw them. Lily and her mother were at their bench getting ready to leave. The mother was standing a few feet away, her back to them, speaking on her phone. Her shoulders were shaking with quiet sobs. Ryan's focus, though, was on the doll sitting alone on the bench. This was his chance. He wasn't in his ceremonial uniform. He wasn't on the sacred mat. He was just a soldier off duty. He could talk to them, reason with them, and put an end to this. He changed his course, his boots making firm, determined sounds on the pavement. He reached the bench and stood over the doll for a moment, looking down at its single vacant eye. He felt a surge of all the frustration and anger that had been building for months. He snatched it up. Its cloth body was soft and worn, but its head and limbs were made of a hard, brittle plastic yellowed with age. "You can't leave this here." His voice was a low growl, harsher than he'd intended. It was the voice he used on new recruits who fumbled their drills. The little girl Lily turned to look up at him. She wasn't scared. Her expression was unreadable, a deep, placid calm that only infuriated him more. She just watched him, her solemn eyes fixed on his. "This is a place of respect," he went on, his voice rising. "You don't leave your toys lying around. This is not a playground." He was gesturing with the doll, his grip tightening. He felt the fire of his conviction, the certainty that he was doing the right thing, protecting the honor of this place from a careless child. And in that moment of self-righteous fury, fueled by a grief he refused to see, his hand clenched. Cracking. The sound was sharp and sickeningly final. It wasn't loud, but in the quiet plaza it sounded like a gunshot. He looked down. The doll's plastic arm had shattered in his fist. A long, jagged fracture ran from its shoulder to its elbow. He had broken it. The stoic guard, the man of perfect control, had just lost his composure and broken a little girl's toy. The fortress had crumbled. The world just stopped. The wind died. The distant traffic faded. All that existed was the shattered doll in his hand, the small piece of plastic on the ground, and the unwavering gaze of the little girl. Ryan stared at his own hand, at the damage it had done, as if it belonged to someone else. A wave of cold shock washed over him, extinguishing his anger and leaving behind the icy dread of his old guilt. He expected tears a scream for the girl to run to her mother. But Lily did none of those things. She simply looked at the broken arm and then back up at him. Her expression softened into something that looked unnervingly like pity. Her mother, hearing the crack, ended her call and turned. Her face already etched with sorrow took in the scene the towering soldier, the broken doll, her silent daughter. She rushed over and knelt beside Lily, wrapping an arm around her. She looked at Ryan, and there was no anger in her eyes, only a deep, weary understanding. I'm sorry, Ryan stammered the words, feeling clumsy and foreign. The stoic Sergeant Miller was gone, replaced by a fumbling, guilty man. I didn't mean to. I gripped it too hard. The mother pulled Lily closer. It's all right, sweetheart, she whispered before looking back at Ryan. Her voice was gentle. Her name is Rosie, she said, nodding toward the doll. It was a gift from her dad. A knot tightened in Ryan's stomach. He wanted to apologize again, to explain, but the mother continued, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. He gave it to Lily before his last deployment. He was a captain in the 101st Airborne. He told her that Rosie would be her soldier to watch over her and keep her safe until he came home. She paused, taking a shaky breath. He's buried here. Section 60. We come to visit, but Lily? She's scared of the headstones. She says it's too quiet there. She believes the tomb is where the bravest soldiers, his work friends, watch over everyone. So she brings Rosie here. She leaves her on this bench so her dad's friends can keep her company, so he won't be lonely. Every word dismantled Ryan's story of disrespect. The ritual wasn't defiance. It was a profound, desperate act of love from a child trying to build a bridge to a father she could no longer touch. Ryan's world was completely undone. But the final devastating blow came from the little girl herself. Lily reached out and took the broken doll from Ryan's limp hand. She examined the fractured arm with a clinical sadness. Then she looked directly into Ryan's eyes, her own filled with a wisdom far beyond her years. It's okay, she said, her voice a quiet bell in the heavy silence. Daddy was broken when he came home too. But he's still a hero, just like you. Daddy was broken when he came home too. Those words didn't just break the silence. They broke him. They bypassed his armor, his discipline, his years of denial, and plunged straight into the raw, unhealed wound in his soul. Broken, but still a hero. In that instant, he wasn't Sergeant Miller Tomb Guard. He was 16-year-old Ryan standing by a creek looking at his own broken reflection in the water. He saw his shattered soul, the guilt he'd carried for years, the belief that his one failure had defined him forever. The girl's innocent words offered a grace he had never allowed himself. The idea that you could be broken and still be a hero, that your wounds didn't erase your worth, was a revelation. The strength in his legs gave out. He sank to his knees on the pavement, the rigid soldier melting away, leaving just a man finally confronting his own ghost. He looked at the broken piece of plastic, then at the doll, and finally at Lily. He finally got it. He hadn't been guarding the tomb from her. He had been guarding his own pain from her love. Her ritual wasn't a disruption to the sacred order. It was the sacred order. The tomb of the unknown soldier wasn't just for the dead. It was for the living. It was for mothers weeping on the phone and for daughters who used dolls to talk to their fathers. It was a place for broken people to come and feel whole. Tears, hot and unfamiliar, streamed down his face. The fortress hadn't just cracked, it had been leveled. And in the ruins, something new was beginning to grow. I am so sorry, he said, and the words were no longer clumsy. They carried the weight of a decade of unspoken grief. He wasn't just apologizing for the doll. He was apologizing to Lily for his judgment to her mother, for his intrusion, and to the memory of her father for his blindness. And in the quiet of his own heart, he was finally apologizing to Tommy. He looked at the mother, a stranger who had shown him more grace than he'd ever shown himself. I lost someone, he heard himself say, the admission costing him everything, and yet setting him free. My brother, a long time ago. There was a toy. I was supposed to be watching him. The confession hung in the air, a fragile offering. The mother's expression softened even more. She truly saw him then, past the uniform, past the mask, and recognized the familiar landscape of loss in his eyes. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She simply nodded a gesture of shared understanding that was more powerful than any words. In the profound silence that followed, a new resolve formed inside Ryan. The need for perfect order was gone, replaced by a need to make things right. He looked at the broken doll, no longer seeing a symbol of his failure, but an opportunity for redemption. "I can fix it," he said, his voice gaining a sliver of its old confidence, but now tempered with a new humility. "I'm good with my hands. I can make her arms strong again." Lily looked at her mother, who gave a small, encouraging nod. The girl then turned back to Ryan and held out the doll, an offering of trust. As his fingers closed around the worn cloth, he felt a new sense of purpose settle over him. This small act of mending felt more important than any patrol he had ever marched. Over the next few days, Ryan worked on the doll with the same meticulous precision he applied to his rifle. In the quiet of his barracks room, he carefully glued the shattered arm back together, reinforcing it from the inside with epoxy and a small metal pin. He stitched the torn seam on its leg with neat, even stitches he'd learned for field repairs. The work was slow and deliberate, a meditation. With every piece he reassembled, he felt like he was reassembling a piece of himself. But he didn't just repair the damage. He took a small piece of wood and with a pocket knife carefully carved a tiny 5-pointed star. He sanded it smooth and painted it gold. Then he stitched the small star onto the doll's faded dress right over its heart. A tiny medal for a soldier named Rosie who had bravely stood her post. A week later, he met Lily and her mother near the visitor's center. He felt a nervous flutter he hadn't felt in years. He knelt down to Lily's level and held out the restored doll. She took it, her eyes wide. She ran a finger over the mended arm, now stronger than before. She touched the small golden star on its chest, and a slow, beautiful smile spread across her face, the first smile Ryan had ever seen from her. Then she did something that broke him and rebuilt him all at once. She leaned forward and wrapped her small arms around his neck. "Thank you for fixing my soldier," she whispered. Ryan Miller still marches his 21 steps. His uniform is still perfect. To any onlooker, he is the same unwavering symbol of discipline, but his heart is different. Now, when he turns to face east, he sometimes sees a little girl with corn silk hair on a bench, a one-eyed doll with a golden star on its chest sitting beside her. He understands now that his duty isn't just to the honored dead. He's standing guard for the living too, for their memories, their grief, and their unbreakable love. He's guarding for the broken heroes and for the little girls who know how to mend them. This story reminds us that our deepest wounds don't have to define us. What did you take away from Ryan and Lily's story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read everyone. And if these stories matter to you, please support our work by liking this video and subscribing for more content that honors our heroes. In the end, a soldier and a little girl mended a doll, but what they really fixed was something far more fragile. They remind us that the heaviest burdens aren't carried on the battlefield, but in the quiet chambers of the heart, that our broken pieces don't disqualify us from being heroes, and that real strength isn't the absence of weakness, but the courage to face it. Sometimes the greatest act of honor isn't standing guard with a rifle, but having the humility to kneel to listen and to help someone mend a memory. Because in healing others, we often find the grace to finally heal ourselves.